Hi, everyone. This is Lance speaking to you from the southern Oaxacan coast in Mexico, where my wife and I, Martha and I, live, where we decided to retire, and where we're currently making big trouble for Trump and his minions from here. Uh, we wanted to take some questions and answers today, and obviously, we have a very stressful situation where it's very difficult to even read the news, and it's even more difficult to write about it. I think that it's worth taking a minute to think about what has happened since Trump came into office, because it's worse than most people thought, on one hand. But remember, we're only in July. It's only 6 months of his administration. And in the case of fascist regimes like his, they take a little time to really do their worst. They build up gradually to get people used to the idea of having their freedoms taken away, their services taken away, pretty much in the fashion of the old frog in boiling water metaphor. So we haven't seen anything yet, as bad as it's been. And I think that people really do need to come to grips with that from the standpoint of understanding why we need a whole different approach to political organizing and resistance, and to increase our demands on the Democratic leadership that they get into the fight in a way they have not as of this moment. Pretty much all of their opposition has been performative in nature and for public consumption and symbolic. They haven't actually done a thing to seriously obstruct anything that Trump has done. They're posturing, they're raising money for the 2026 elections. They are playing political gamesmanship in trying to manage media perception, and are pursuing the fruitless, ridiculous strategy of trying to find areas of compromise with the MAGA Republicans in Congress. Which I'll elaborate on a little bit more in response to a question. But right now, let's get down to the questions, because people have a lot on their mind. I have a lot on my mind, and it's better to give voice to it, even if we're not particularly on target and we're missing certain things and somehow grasping at straws. We want to actually get somewhere, and the only way to do that is through having dialogue, through having conversation. So I'm speaking here from my vantage point of not being an expert on everything, but having a little bit of background in politics, going back many years, and having certain insights, having been a political organizer and fundraiser, that I bring to bear in the organizing and in the discussion. Also, my wife Martha and I have done an enormous amount of work on history and culture, which gives us additional perspective on why things are the way they are. So let's just get started. One question is, what do you have on your 2026 bingo card? Which is kind of funny, because I think it's pretty clear that the questioner is asking about the midterms. I don't think there's anything else happening worth talking about in 2026. First off, we hope there are going to be midterms. We hope that Trump and Stephen Miller and this gang of lunatics do not engineer some kind of national emergency which gives them the basis for imposing the 1807 Insurrection Act and suspending or canceling elections. We also hope that they don't gain the political power to be able to overturn elections at will. Now, people maybe a year ago would have said that's ridiculous. That could never happen in the United States. I mean, it would be rioting. Well, that's exactly what they want. For example, Trump has already said that he's considering arresting Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor in New York City, and having him deported because of his statements on Gaza and Israel and the Palestinian human rights issue across the board. Then you have Tom Homan, who is the head of Customs and Border Security, has actually said that if Mamdani wins the New York mayoral race, he will deploy ICE and the Marines to essentially occupy New York City and run it, to literally take it over, and implying that he's going to oust Mamdani as mayor. That's what he and Trump are actually talking about, which is literally to overturn the election of Mamdani in New York at will, just as out of their own megalomania. So this is not something that they're just talking about with New York. They're talking about this everywhere, that they believe they have the power to just remove governments that obstruct any executive order that comes from Trump's desk. So clearly, we're not in a politics as usual situation. Nevertheless, the 2026 midterms have taken on a much greater importance in the last week, for the very simple reason that Trump's barbaric, bubonic bullshit bill was passed. And a lot of people are talking about various aspects of it, which is the cuts in Medicaid, which are going to be murderous, mass murderous, discussing the tax break, which is a hideous transference of wealth upward from the working families and poor to the coffers of the 1% billionaires, as we all know. This is obscene. Then you have the $178 billion budget allocated to ICE for immigration enforcement. Now, it's not just that the money is insane. If you think about it, that amounts to 1/2 or more of the entire Russian national defense allocation. If you want to actually get some perspective on it in terms of real dollar terms, ICE's budget is half of the Russian national budget for defense. So the issue is that Trump is creating a police state apparatus, and it's very much modeled on Adolf Hitler's stormtroopers, the brown shirts, which at its peak had 2 million members that were being deployed by the Nazi Party to purge Jews, kill Jews, wage street fighting with communists, enforce the will of the regime, and conduct a reign of terror against any voices of opposition, whether they be political parties or church leaders or whomever, to force them to submit to the regime. Now, this, just to look at the history of the SA, where did these people come from? A lot of them were broken war veterans from World War I. A lot of them were unemployed men in the cities who were vagrants, who were what we would call lumpenized, who were uneducated, who were essentially street thugs. They were not educated, many of them, but they shared Hitler's fever dream of eradicating Jewry. They were violent. Many of them just joined for the violence because they could get fed, they could get clothed, they could get housed, and all they had to do was beat some people up who they were ordered to beat up. So the SA was an unruly mess, and in the leadership of the SA were a bunch of former communists and socialists who had switched over to the Nazi Party. 70% of the brown shirts that had joined by the year 1932, right before the German elections, were former communists and socialists who had switched over. And basically, Hitler was told by the military that he had to deal with the SA because the SA was too powerful, too big, and its leaders, Gregor Strasser and Ernst Röhm, were demanding power over the army, that the army be incorporated under the stormtrooper leadership. And that was not acceptable to the army or to the industrialists that had funded Hitler, because they feared the kind of left Nazi ideology of the stormtroopers who wanted to actually carry out income redistribution and break up a lot of the landowners' wealth. They still had those leanings. So they felt threatened by the stormtroopers and their leaders. So basically what Hitler did was, because he had gotten the army to take a loyalty oath to him personally, not to the Weimar Republic or its constitution, in exchange for that loyalty oath, he agreed to decapitate the leadership of the SA. And that the SA would basically be kept in just a shell form. And most of its members either go to work for the police or be incorporated into the army or into the Nazi Labor Front. It would just be kept around in name only. So that's what actually was done with Hitler's Night of the Long Knives in June of 1934, when the leaders of the SA, the brown shirts, were arrested and murdered in a bloodbath that officially they say there were 200 people killed in one night on Hitler's orders, but it was likely closer to 1,000, because Hitler took the occasion of the bloodbath of the purge to round up and murder his longer-term political enemies, including people against whom he wanted retribution for putting him on trial after his Munich putsch, his attempt to overthrow the government of Bavaria with his coup attempt in 1923. And also his longer-term political enemies among German conservatives, leaders of the Communist Party that were on his list, and just a whole array of people. He even arrested the former Chancellor of Germany, Kurt von Schleicher, and his wife, and had them murdered. All right, so this thing was really an absolute blood coup. So what happened was that Hitler's SA was incorporated into the military. Now you have Stephen Miller, essentially is the leader of the White House. He's running the show. He's making policy in all areas, except for possibly foreign policy. But he's the one running the FBI. He's running the Department of Justice. He's running the Department of Homeland Security. He's in charge of ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, anything related to the commitment of Trump, the administration, Project 2025, and its architects that's intended to create a police state in the United States. Miller is running from his position as Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House. He's the guy in charge. All right, and what Miller is, as people might know, he is a white nationalist, right? He is somebody who emulates and idealizes the Nazis, except in his mind, the enemy within that has to be exterminated began with Muslims and is extended to people with brown skin. So he sees any non-white, non-Christian, non-Jewish minority as an enemy to be exterminated because he sees them as disease carriers, as rapists, as criminals, as subhumans, or as the Nazis called them, Untermenschen. That's Miller's identity. So his intention is to use the fear that he is creating through propaganda about how the Mexican immigrant population of the United States are really a movement of rapists, MS-13 gang members, and employed by the drug cartels. In other words, that this is a drug cartel MS-13 invasion of the United States. Every migrant, every immigrant in the United States that is of Hispanic origin is at war with the United States, is conducting an invasion. So he's used this fear campaign to build up this movement for mass deportation. And he's created a monster in the form of this ICE apparatus, and he's assigned very, very heavy quotas to ICE for the number of people detained, whether they're legal, illegal, it doesn't matter. Whether they're citizens, it doesn't matter. The number of arrests, the number of detentions is what matters. There's a quota system and a bonus system which is rewarding these guys with ICE financially for the number of people they round up. So what is he really doing? He's using the immigration fear campaign to build up an apparatus whose actual intention is going to be to run a dictatorship over the entire American population. Because the economic policy that they're implementing is so brutal in terms of the effects of the tariffs, the effects of the budget cuts, the effects of the mass layoffs, the obscene profit taking by the corporations, now that they don't have to pay much in the way of taxes, the whole deregulation wave in which the basic protections for labor and for the environment are being dismantled. The carnage is going to be extraordinary, and there's going to be even greater opposition growing, which is not going to be so peaceful. You saw 5 million people out in the streets just a few weeks ago. This is going to grow, and basically what Miller is doing and what Trump is doing is looking for opportunities to create provocations to provoke violence, so that then they can deploy ICE and the military in together. So what is Miller doing? He's learned the lesson of Hitler's mistake in eliminating the stormtroopers and incorporating them into the army. Miller's doing the opposite. He's incorporating the US military into ICE. He's deploying ICE onto Marine bases for so-called security. He's got the military acting as chaperones for ICE when they invade American cities to enforce their arrest and detention policy. So in other words, the US military being deployed domestically is being put in the service of the ICE apparatus, which now has a budget which is 1/2, I repeat, of the size of the Russian Federation's national defense budget. And that ICE apparatus is going to be deployed against you and me and everyone, not just illegal immigrants, not just illegals that were convicted of something, but everybody. And in particular, any voice of opposition, any institutional opposition. So that has implications. What we need to do is we need to get control of the House of Representatives in order to defund ICE. And I can say that it would be ideal if we can retake both houses, if we can take the Senate too. But the House has the control over the budget under our system of constitutional checks and balances and power sharing. If the Democrats can get control of the House, we can use whatever tactics and strategy are needed, including shutting down the government, to force the defunding of ICE, to dismantle that entire apparatus that Miller has created. Now, in order to do this, in order to actually retake the House, we have to actually change the way we organize and campaign. We have to put to an end the awful Democratic Party outlook of trying to triangulate and make compromise with the Republicans. they have to go to war. And the leaders of the Democratic Party have to break with their current strategy of sitting back, letting Trump govern, letting MAGA make a mess out of everything, and then trying to pick up the pieces in 2026. That's essentially what they're doing. They're saying that the worse they make it, the better it is for us in 2 years. Whereas in reality, that strategy is demoralizing the Democratic voter and activist base and guarantees that we will not win in 2026 because the Democratic Party will fracture between progressives, centrists, liberals, etc. because there's going to be so much dissatisfaction with the lack of fight from the Democratic leadership that it will spread disunity. And so this is going to hurt us in 2026. What will unify the Democratic Party and the various contending elements of it is a leadership which is on the same page as the majority of Democrats, which is they want to see some fighting going on. They want to see real opposition. They want to see real resistance. And that means doing things outside of the Beltway of Washington, D.C. that don't involve the typical kind of gamesmanship they've been engaged in. They have to go out to the population and mobilize them. They have to take aggressive action. They need to lead civil disobedience. They need to get arrested. They need to actually lead boycotts. They need to do things to put themselves on the line as opposed to trying to manage their careers. I hope this really sinks in that these guys right now are posturing and pandering. They're not leading. And if we have to have a leadership shakeup in order to get the kind of leadership we need, then so be it. So 2026 for me has a whole new significance because of what the MAGA Republicans have done in empowering this Stephen Miller combined Gestapo stormtrooper apparatus and the way they're merging it with the US military. Who are they going to hire with this $178 billion budget? Well, who do you think? It's the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. It's the militias. It's the former Oath Keepers and the American Patriot 3%ers. And God knows who else. What other kind of Nazi right-wing Christian nationalist cults that are stockpiling weapons? They're the people that are going to be volunteering to become bounty hunters for Stephen Miller. That's what you're dealing with. Nazis and psychos, people who are convinced we're being invaded by the drug cartels in MS-13. All right, so the relative point is that the only way to stop that, in my judgment, is to get control of the House and dismantle that whole agency, right? And disrupt it, obstruct it, do whatever is needed, including shutting down the government, right? And that's something that we need to talk about. And in cases where you have Democrats that are literal traitors like John Fetterman in the Senate, even though he's not running in 2026, we have to be really ruthless in rooting these guys out, exposing them, confronting them, forcing them to change, or running against them. And take the gloves off. Stop deluding ourselves that somehow that we should reelect these guys because they're incumbents, and somehow we've got to stick with every incumbent because that's how we're going to take Congress back. No, that's not going to work. So let me get to another question. I apologize for going on that one a little more than I wanted to, but let's take up the next question. Who will go first, Pete Hegseth or Pamela Bondi? Now, that's an interesting question because Bondi is the person who, in the cabinet, I think is the most personally loyal to Donald Trump. She'll be the last to go. She's his enforcer. She's his puppet. She is his personal J. Edgar Hoover. And Miller is really the one running the show there anyway. So they're going to keep her around because she has a personal vested interest in this whole mass deportation, fascist police state operation, because she's personally invested and has profited by the prison industrial complex that is going to be benefited by this $178 billion ICE budget. So, whereas Hegseth, he's just a pretty face that Trump picked because he looks good on television. He's an incompetent boob. He's already had to call Hegseth on the carpet on 3 or 4 occasions due to his fuck-ups in regard to the Signal chat, in regard to this latest incident where he cut off arms to Ukraine without telling anybody, at precisely the point where Trump was trying to strong-arm and leverage Putin around Ukraine, where he's threatening Putin with rearming Ukraine in a big way if he doesn't come to the table and compromise. So Trump had to call him on the phone and ream him out for doing that. So Hegseth is kind of like, remember those toys they used to sell for kids, these blown up balloon figures that you could punch and they would go all the way down, but they were weighted on the bottom and they'd spring back up again? That's Pete Hegseth. He's just a punching bag for various people, and Trump is not committed to him at all. So seriously, at a certain point, Hegseth is going to be dumped, and they'll bring in somebody that is acceptable not only to Trump but to the Pentagon, because the amount of screaming, even among the Trump loyalists, about Hegseth's incompetence is increasing in volume. Hegseth can't even get anybody to be part of his staff because everybody knows his days are numbered, and they don't want to take a job which is going to last for 2 or 3 or 4 months. So that's the easiest question I got from anyone. Hegseth's going to be first to go. Excuse me. Time for a little Oaxacan dark roast coffee, which is one of the best in the world. Another question is, who is ICE? Is it the mercenaries, the private armies? Is it the white supremacist groups? I addressed that a little bit earlier. Yeah, there is a heavy component of the private security industry involved with ICE now. Erik Prince has been fully engaged in recruiting people to join in the mass deportation operation since Trump, officially began his campaign. And even though Prince is not the only private security company in the neighborhood, he carries a lot of weight and people follow him. So these other companies are like appendages of his operation who follow in his lead. So yeah, this is a serious thing that this ICE apparatus is what it is, and I'm not going to rehash that, but I think it is important to look at the fact that they are Trump's private army. This is the greatest threat to democracy in American history, and there is no way that I can exaggerate the importance of us dismantling that whole apparatus. That has to be done, because if you don't dismantle ICE, we're not going to be able to change anything. We're not going to be able to fight to defend Social Security or Medicare or people's pensions. We're not going to be able to do anything on climate. We're not going to do anything to reverse the tax cut atrocity. We're not going to get anywhere on the budget deficit, because politics itself will be crushed. We will have no recourse through politics or elections or free speech to address any of these other problems. So I don't see any other greater priority than the dismantling of the ICE apparatus, period, right? And I'm not even going to have a big debate on this. This is at this point my center of thinking. Who are the players behind Donald Trump? Everybody's harping on him. Who are the people running the game? Elon Musk was used just like Trump. We know some, but not all. Well, that's an interesting question, and I'll reiterate what I said earlier. Stephen Miller is running the show. He's calling the shots now. For a very short period of time, when Trump was putting together his administration, he gave Musk a lot of latitude to hire and fire and intervene on policy. And he even had him go to the UN to negotiate with the Iranians. Musk was sticking his nose in foreign policy. He was running cabinet meetings. And the inevitable happened, the clash of the Titanic egos. And they had a falling out over the budget. So Musk is out. Trump may even have him arrested or deported and might even cut off the subsidies to his companies. Musk has backed down a little bit, then reemerged in his opposition, and now he's calling for a third party. It's all bullshit. Just to go on the record, a third party, no matter who's initiating it, Elon Musk, Mark Cuban, whoever, is just complete, utter bullshit. Right? It's the stupidest thing we could do. We need to shake up the Democratic leadership and make it function. It's the only institution that exists with the power and the mass base to defeat Trump and MAGA. Right? A third party will not harm Trump one iota. It will harm the Democratic Party. Right? So it's stupid. It's mistimed. Maybe in 10 years, after Trump is dead and MAGA is buried with him, then we can talk about a different kind of more parliamentary system. But right now, if you want a resistance, we got to shake up and rebuild the Democratic Party around the ideas that the Democratic Party used to stand for. Get serious. So that said, in answer to that question, Stephen Miller is the most nefarious, most consciously evil, most malignant individual ever in U.S. history to have the power that he has over the White House. There is no comparison in American history. Not even Dick Cheney compares with Stephen Miller. All right, and right now, Stephen Miller, officially titled Deputy Chief of Staff, is functioning as